What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I'm just making a quick tier list with my thoughts on the meta for Knoxville Regionals coming up. This is going to differ from my best decks video that came out yesterday because that was strictly based on data, and this is going to be based on my opinion. So I'll be ranking decks pretty much based off of their matchup spreads into the predicted meta. The only deck here I think I won't be putting on the list is Miraidon Regieleki, which was just in the template for the tier list. But yeah, so let's talk about this. So I think Gardevoir is S tier, because it has a good matchup into Charizard, a good matchup into Snorlax, a good matchup into Sablezard, a good matchup into Mew VMAX. Yeah, essentially, and then it also has like an even-ish matchup into Tina, where I feel if both players draw reasonably well, typically the player with more experience in that and knowledge in that matchup is going to win. Also it has a good Roaring Moon matchup. Really the problem with Guardy is a bunch of like tier 1.5 decks, which I'll get into. But yeah, so I think Gardevoir is S tier this weekend. I think it was probably S tier the past couple of weekends as well. It just doesn't have the play rate as much as like Charizard and Tina does, but I think it could actually be like third or second most popular deck this weekend, because I think a lot of other top players are beginning to agree with my evaluation of Gardevoir, and also Knoxville is going to be a smaller event than Charlotte, so it might be more concentrated with like players trying to actually win the event as opposed to just being part of the general population trying to make day two. So obviously Charizard's a tier 1 deck. Obviously Giratina is a tier 1 deck. Now, like I said, this is strictly for Knoxville. This is not my depiction of the format as a whole or how we'll look back on it. Um, Tina has the most placements and Charizard has been the most popular, but for this upcoming weekend in Knoxville, I do think Gardevoir is just better than both of them. So Tina is a great deck because it doesn't have any awful matchups. The Roaring Moon matchup is not as good as it used to be, and the Mew matchup is sus if you don't have Spirit Tomb. So they're like not okay. So like the Mew matchup isn't like unbeatable or anything. It's like slightly unfavored for Tina, but for Tina that's actually pretty bad because it's used to having no bad matchups. And then Roaring Moon, with the jellies and also with the catchers and the stone to find boss, the extra gust effects options. Um, Moon's win condition against Tina is to Gust KO a Tina V or to Frenzy Gouging Tina V Star with Emergency Jelly on it. And they just have more outs to those win conditions and those strong plays now as the lists have gotten better. Yeah, Tina is still a very, very, very good deck. It doesn't have any abysmal matchups, but yeah. So Roaring Moon, I'm gonna put at 1.5. I can't put it in 1 because it has a bad Gardevoir matchup, it has a bad Charizard matchup, and it has a bad Lost Zone box matchup. This is strictly going to be like the Professor Research heavy version of Roaring Moon. I'd put all other versions in tier 2, but I'm only ranking this one. DTE Mew, definitely a tier 1 deck. So it has a good matchup into Tina, but bad it has an unfavored matchup into both Gardevoir and Charizard. But DTE Mew is just so inherently strong that even though its matchup spread is not amazing, it's very, very tough for me to put this anywhere lower than tier 1 just because of the inherent deck strength. Similar thing with Roaring Moon, but not as much, of course, because Mew is crazy. Roaring Moon doesn't actually have a great matchup spread, but it's just a deck that functions very consistently and aggressively, which causes me to bring it up a little higher than its matchup spread might call for. I'm also going to put specifically Peony Miraidon in tier 1.5, and I'm going to put Judge Path Miraidon in tier 2. Okay, so Peony Miraidon is Gardevoir's absolute worst matchup. Absolute worst matchup for Gardevoir, Peony, Miraidon. And it's just generally very fast and pretty aggressive against other decks as well. The Judge Path Miraidon just feels way too fair of a deck for me. It's not something I am interested in playing, especially with your bad matchup against Charizard. They're very prepared to get out of Path to the Peak, so I don't feel like Judge and 2 Path, like 2 Judge, 1 Iono, 2 Path is like ample counter for Charizard to have a chance in that matchup. So yeah, with Charizard being so popular, it's very hard for me to justify playing Miraidon. Also, with Mew just winning Liverpool, it's hard for me to justify playing Miraidon. And I do think a lot of Miraidon players may switch over to Roaring Moon. Honestly, that's what I'm hoping for because I'm playing Gardevoir, and Miraidon is my worst matchup, and I do not want to tech for it. If I did tech for it in Gardevoir, it would just be adding a single Klefki into my Gardevoir, so then you can retreat into Klefki turn 1 against Miraidon, and if they don't have Gust or Rope out of it, then they don't get to use Squawk ability, they don't get to use Tandem Unit, and their board sucks. But that Klefki, I've tested it. It does work against Miraidon, but it's not really worthwhile against anything else. Because, like, Entei Iron Valiant plays 4 ropes. Roaring Moon plays 2 boss, 2 catcher, rope, Farseal, stone. They have Town Store. They have an aggressive draw engine. So, yeah, and even Miraidon, they have Peony to get out of it. So I did consider, how would I tech for Miraidon if I really wanted to secure that matchup a little more, but I'm just going to take the loss to it and hope that not enough people play Miraidon because of its bad matchup into Charizard and Mew, which are the reasons I wouldn't play Miraidon. Arceus got to be tier 3. I understand that somebody will do well with it. Like, all of these decks are meta decks, pretty much, so, like, you can do well with them, except for Miraidon Regieleki. Like I said, I do not know why that's on the tier list. Like, can a tier 3 deck make day 2? Sure. Am I playing it for my best chance to win the event? Absolutely not. So Chien-Pao. Chien-Pao, I'm going to put into tier 1.5 because with the Iron Hands, because of its good Gardevoir matchup and its good Charizard matchup. That actually carries a lot of weight this weekend, having a good matchup into both of those. So that's something that Miraidon doesn't have. Miraidon has a good matchup into Guardy, but not into Zard. Chien-Pao has a good matchup into both of them. Then we're also going to talk about Sablezard. So Sablezard's going to go tier 1.5. Its matchup spread's pretty good. It has an incredible matchup against Roaring Moon. Nearly an unlosable matchup against Roaring Moon. You're also going to beat Tina players who don't know how to play against single prize Lost Zone. You have TM Devos to handle Charizard. You're going to trade favorably into Mew. And if you play against suboptimal Gardevoirs, maybe they prize Jirachi, maybe they don't know how to play the matchup, maybe they don't even play Jirachi. Gardevoir is a winnable matchup, but tough. So Sablezard is looking good again for this weekend. Alex Szymanski made a really good run with it in Charlotte. Brennan Kamerman made a good run with it in Liverpool. I expect it to have similar potential this weekend coming up. Entei Iron Valiant is tier 2. I don't love the deck. It's good against Guardy. It can get Yoga Loop turns and stuff against any evolving deck or any Lost Zone deck because of the small HP Pokemon. I'm not a fan of it. It's not a deck I would play because its mid and end game are atrocious. So if your opponent survives through and can build up tanky Pokemon, there's not a lot you can do at the end game. Fusion Mew, I really, really don't like Fusion Mew this weekend, but it is Mew. It can't be that bad, so I'm going to put it in tier 1.5. Because like Mew can only be so bad. The deck, the archetype just carries so much inherent strength between Mew VMAX and Genesect V and the engine of Cramomatic and VIP Pass, Judge, Path, Lost City, Alessa Sparkle, Fusion Strike with Meloetta or Ice Cube. The deck just has a lot of inherent strength, so even though I don't like its matchups too much, I don't think I can realistically put it too much lower. Maybe it could go tier 2, but it's Mew, and Mew is very, very strong. Mew is consistent, and for people not going to Vancouver like myself, I'm not playing another tournament after Knoxville until rotation happens. So this could be a lot of people's last chance to play Mew. So we could see it played just strictly because of that as well. Rapid Strike Urshifu I also think has fallen down into tier 2. It's bad against Moon, it's bad against Mew, and its Tina matchup is close. It does have a good matchup into Guardy and Zard, a better matchup into Zard than Guardy. Guardy is still completely losable, and I think the deck is just too clunky for its middling matchup spread right now. Snorlax is an interesting one. So if you are under the assumption that Snorlax beats Gardevoir, and that Gardevoir players will not be using Professor Tauros this weekend, which is very possible because Gardevoir players, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking Gardevoir is good for this weekend, so they're going to want to play Avery in their decks. The more people that include Avery in their decks for the mirror match, and then they're including Jirachi for the Lost Zone stuff, and they're keeping both Screamtail and Cresselia, and they're playing VIP Pass. They don't have enough room in their deck for Tauros, so you know, Snorlax, if they don't play Tauros and you can get a non-Gardevoir line Pokemon into the active position and not bench a Rotom so they have the boss out, then Snorlax does have a favored matchup into Gardevoir, and it beats Charizard convincingly. And it has a fine matchup against Mew. It has a not as bad a matchup against Tina as people allude to. It's very possible for a good stall player to beat a Tina who misplays. It's very, very possible for that to happen. Like, I know Cal Connor has been beating Tinas with Snorlax stall at recent regionals, and in testing, I've been able to do it as well with Snorlax. So, Snorlax is good. It really depends on if you think Gardevoir players will be prepared for it this weekend, or how many Gardevoir players you actually think you'll hit that have Toro in them. Because if Charizard continues to be the most popular deck at like 15, 18, 20% of the meta share, that's just free wins all around, you know? So that's the pretty much the positive for Snorlax is you have a pretty much unlosable matchup against the most popular deck in the format. Gholdengo Palkia, it can be pretty good against Guardy and Zard depending on its start. I'm gonna put it into tier 2. Cloth Electrode, this deck almost feels real now if we're expecting that Roaring Moon has more popularity this weekend, and its matchup against some of the other decks aren't impossible either, so I'm going to leave Cloth Electrode in tier 2. I'm going to put Turbo Lost Zone in tier... I mean, it's either tier 1.5 or tier 2. I'll put Turbo Lost Zone in tier 2 as well, and then I think that's my tier list. So, according to my matchup spreadsheet, the best matchup spreads for this tournament are Sablezard, Gardevoir, and Snorlax, with Tina as a close fourth, and then Turbo Lost Zone Box behind it. But that's with, you know, weighted matchup spreads and stuff, so I think that matters a lot more in day 2 than it does for day 1, so actually making it through day 1 is a, you know, that's a feat of itself. So I'm not just strictly basing this off of whatever my matchup spreadsheet spit out. I do think Sablezard's a very good play if Roaring Moon does rise, but it also might falter against all the Guardies that come out, so Sablezard should be in a good spot, but it's a little bit of a weird spot. And yeah, this is my tier list for Knoxville Regionals. Thanks for watching. Check out ways to support my channel in the description down below. Sponsors, affiliates, subscribe to the channel. Good luck if you're going to Knoxville, and I'll see you there.